Hello, my name is Danica Noble. I'm with the Normal Women of Washington, and I believe this is my 20th anniversary of the first time with Hempfest. So I'm really excited to be a part of this historic online COVID-safe version. And I'm just so happy to have stayed connected to such an important organization in this movement. The Normal Women of Washington is an organization dedicated to education, outreach, and normalization of marijuana. And we want to help empower women to have voices in their communities on the policies that affect them. And we invite any of you to join us. We have a virtual meeting every second Saturday. You can check us out on Facebook or Twitter. But we're here today to talk about how to talk about cannabis. So this panel is meant to have some tips and some stories about how to have conversations about cannabis, and that will help to move this entire movement and the industry forward, and make sure, as I think Normal Women is important to us, to make sure that social justice and important issues stay a part of this conversation. So enough about me. I want to introduce our panelists. So we have Lisa Buchanan. She is a nurse and an oncology nurse. She's been working with patients in Washington since the early 90s. She's a member of the Oncology Nurses Society, the American Cannabis Nurses Association, and a founding member of the Cannabis Nurses Network. She has a strong interest in cannabis therapeutics and believes that we all have a biological right to supplement our endocannabinoid systems for health and wellness. We also have Liz Allen. She graduated from Nathan Hale in 2020. Woo! And attends North Seattle College, where she's majoring in business. She volunteers with Normal Women, and she really helped plan our lobby day this year, which was fantastic, and a part of a project she worked on for school. She currently works at Starbucks and hoping to launch a paraphernalia business soon called Up and Away Supply. And long term, she hopes to own a dispensary. We also have Molly Allen. She is married with 2 daughters, 19 and 15. Liz is one of those. She was born in Spokane, went to college in California, and has been in Seattle for the last 30 years. She works as a marketing consultant at Microsoft, and she also became involved with Normal Women of Washington when her oldest daughter, Liz, became interested in opening a dispensary. And then our fourth panelist is Nancy Jacobson. Nancy educates pet parents on using cannabis as a tool for canine wellness. She, along with a couple fellow cannabis coaches, co-founded 4 Green Dogs Academy. It's a clearinghouse for pet parents to find information on cannabis and pets. So to get started, let's talk about how to have a cannabis conversation with your healthcare provider. Lisa, can you start for us?
There we go. Can you hear me now? I've sat in a lot of these conversations, both in the hospital and in the clinic environment. And really, it's about your therapeutic alliance with your healthcare provider. And I'm going to borrow a little bit from Dr. John Norcross, because he talks about the therapeutic alliance. And that's the quality and strength of the collaborative relationship between the client and the healthcare professional. And it includes your therapeutic goals, the consensus on your treatment, and then a relationship bond that is respectful and genuine. And that's very, very important, right? Whether you have an acute illness or chronic illness, you're going to need that healthcare provider's input. And your best outcome involves your honesty, right? So you need to be transparent. You know, I'm looking into cannabis. I think it could help me with, nausea, sleep, appetite, whichever is appropriate to your issue, and to bring it out there. It can be a scary thing, right? Because you have to prepare yourself for a negative outcome, how you're going to talk about that, and a positive outcome. And I would suggest that you bring a resource with you, because healthcare providers like evidence-based information. This book, oh no, you can't see it with my background. It is The Cannabis Pharmacy. It's a $25 book written by Michael Bacchus. Very research heavy, but very easy to read. And this will be very helpful to your healthcare provider. Written in lay language, it'll be helpful for you too, talking to your family. But you want to put that out there wherever you can. Now, there are reasons you might not want to, right? Because you might not want your insurance to know because your employer has some access to some information. You might not want your employer to know, and you might not want a regulating agency to know. So, have you ever heard of a marijuana clinic? Think, that's not a bad thing. That is a clinic that has hired an advanced practice nurse, a naturopathic physician, or a physician to talk to you about cannabis therapeutics. They're an expert in their field. And it's appropriate to see a specialist when you need specialized care. And so you can self-pay there, stay out, and be private. And for a lot of people, they need that. But the acutely ill, your specialist might be your oncologist or your rheumatologist. And this is an appropriate place to take that risk and talk. So transparency, I'd like to do this. Why? And the other thing to remember is if you're in Washington State or another adult use state, you can have this conversation with your physician and you can get authorized, right? But you don't have to. As an adult, you can go in with your ID and you can make this decision on your own. I highly recommend it that you talk to your provider and your family, right? Because if your disease advances and you're not always in control of what happens to you, you want your loved ones, your family, to help you use the kind of medicines you want to use on your journey. And so transparency is big. It's really big. I think that's really the basics of it, but open, truthful, and ask for their participation. And if it's negative, ask for the whys, because you can always continue to work on that. It's an alliance. It takes both of you to get the best outcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Lisa, that was great and helpful. And I think we'll have more questions and appreciate those thoughts. Let's move to Nancy and ask for how to have a cannabis conversation with your vet, with someone who's helping care for your animal.
Thank you. One of the gray areas for veterinarians has been in a lot of jurisdictions, well, even in places where recreational and medical are acceptable for humans, veterinarians are still not allowed to broach the subject of using cannabis-based medicine for your dog or for your cat or for actually any animal. So it is actually on you, the client. It's your responsibility to bring up that conversation. They can talk to you about cannabis, be it CBD or THC containing medication, if you bring it up. It's still, as I say, it's still a very rocky situation with a lot of the veterinarian associations. And on a state-by-state level, some of them have allowed their members to be more permissive about what they can and cannot say. But as a general rule, up until very recently, you would not have that say recommending a CBD or a cannabis product. Although I've noticed that in Washington State, it's a little bit easier to have those conversations. And as a matter of fact, I've had that conversation with my vet because before using any cannabis type product, you should have a conversation with your vet, before giving any type of supplement, really. But in particular, anything that might contain THC, since dogs in particular are particularly sensitive because they have more cannabinoid receptors in their brain. And as a result, when I had the conversation with my vet, she actually asked me if what I was giving my dog contained THC, and when I said yes, and holding my breath and hoping that she would be receptive, she said, good, for his condition, he needs what THC can offer in addition to the CBD and the other cannabinoids and that full spectrum and that entourage effect. So it is possible to have good conversations and receptive conversations, and you may be pleasantly surprised that your doctor or your veterinarian is just waiting for you to broach the subject.
Nancy, are there any resources that or books that you might recommend for someone whose vet is cannabis curious?
Yes, there is a very good book written by Dr. Robert Silver called Medical Marijuana for Your Pets, I believe. Don't quote me exactly, but it is Dr. Robert Silver. And he is the go-to person for dosing information when it comes to THC and pets. And in the various different books, Dr. Gary Richter's holistic medicine book for just his in general veterinarian book has a chapter, and he worked very closely with Dr. Silver, and he's using Dr. Silver's formulas as well. So I don't have the name right off the top of my head of Richter's book, but Dr. Silver, Robert Silver, is the name to look for. And the CBD Project also, in their dosing recommendations for animals, have also used Dr. Silver's work, and so I would recommend his book.
And Nancy, I know that cannabis was historically used in treating humans. Is there a historic basis for use with pets or animals that you know of?
Not a historic, not within the annals of veterinarian medicine per se. But there was a time in which, as we know, cannabis was regularly prescribed for humans, and to say that it may have been given to animals for similar ailments would not be that far of a stretch. But as I say, with dogs, because they are particularly sensitive to THC, you would probably not have seen it given to dogs quite that much.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nancy, for giving us some pointers on how to talk with your vet or pet's healthcare provider. Now we're going to shift to talking within your family. So let's start with Liz. Liz, how is it, and for you, and do you have any tips for how to talk to your parents about marijuana?
I was really nervous about talking to my parents at first, but then I really started looking into it at first because I wanted to get my medical card because I don't like taking antibiotics for like anxiety or eating or sleeping. I don't want to take pills. So I was trying to find a more natural path, and I looked up cannabis and all of that. And then I finally when I turned 18, I went to what Lisa was talking about, the professional cannabis. I don't exactly remember the name. But he also gave me other options instead of cannabis, like magnesium and stuff like that. So I just got into the talk of all of that. And then he prescribed me my medical card. And then I was able to go to my parents and have more open conversations about what I liked and what I didn't like, and be more open about what I was doing with them.
And did you have to help educate your parents, or were, they familiar?
My dad smokes, but he always tried to hide it from me. So it was kind of a like tug and pull of, oh, you're still a teenager, so you should wait. And I definitely understand that, but I also didn't want to take medication for that. And so I'm not using it to be like over excessive, but I'm trying to use it medically in the sense like it's supposed to be used. So I think that was the biggest thing that I was trying to get across to my parents, that I'm not a drug user. I'm just using this for my health. I want to eat, sleep, be rested, not feel anxious all the time. And I haven't had a panic attack in over 2 years now since I've been using cannabis. So I think that helps.
Yeah. Did you, in the interaction with your parents, did you discuss with your dad that you were aware that he was using cannabis?
I smelled it when I was younger. And so I like knew it was there, but I never wanted to bring it up because I knew he was always hiding it and stuff like that. And I have a younger sister, so they would just want to keep it even more on like, oh my goodness, secretive levels.
And what about now? Is it still something that's a
Oh
taboo?
no, we've grown. I've grown in my house now, so it's very open now, and they like it. I think they like learning about it and like watching everything produce in the way it should, and like how we don't have to add our own chemicals to our plants, and so they saw like, oh, this is literally just a plant.
Well, that's seems like you've been on a whole journey.
Oh yeah.
Would you have any advice for a teen who was experiencing a health condition that maybe could benefit from cannabis? Would you recommend that they go to a medical professional first, or talk to their parents first? Any ideas based on your experience?
I think if you know your parents are going to be judgmental in a way, I would go to the health professional first and just try to get their point of view on what they think would be the best for you, and what, because they gave me different options and I was considering different options too. I just chose that one because I thought it would be the best. But then if you feel like your parents aren't going to be like as pushy to say, oh no, you need a real doctor, or you need a medical professional, not some cannabis professional. And I'm like, that's when you should just take your own step.
Okay, well, great. And thank you very much for sharing such a personal piece of your journey. I'm sure we'll have more questions for you. But I'd like to turn to your mom and ask Molly, what is it like talking to your children about pot, or having them approach you about pot?
Sure, Danica. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great.
Okay. So when I grew up, I was taught that marijuana was bad. And so when Elizabeth became interested in it around 16, it was pretty frightening. But what I would recommend is, based on our family's experience, is to become as educated as possible, and also to keep an open mind. I just through the whole process of working through things with her, I learned a lot about things that kind of made me more open-minded, more accepting of her point of view. Some of the things that we talked to her about were, from our point of view, we felt like that we didn't really feel like there was research that really talked about how does marijuana affect teenage brains as they're growing, and then also that addiction might have a genetic component, and her biological parents had addiction issues. So those were some of the things that we went through, we talked through. And then eventually what we decided is that we would prefer she didn't use marijuana in our house until she was 21. And she does have her medical card. And as you talked about, like she has talked about it with her own pediatrician. And so it's kind of evolving. But basically, through this process, I feel like I've learned more about the history of cannabis and the idea of the war on drugs, the lack of research because cannabis is a Schedule I drug. And just I came to understand it's a super complex topic. And so we continue to have discussions with Elizabeth and just keep the communication line open. And I think it's been going well.
How about the dynamic with your younger daughter? Is she having more conversations than Liz did when she was her sister's age? Is there a different dynamic happening with her?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. She's a different kind of kid, so she's not really interested in exploring that, but she knows a lot about it at this point in time. And so it's very open, we can talk about anything in front of her, and it's just like everything's sped up for her, and talking to her about it and being open about it.
You said you came from a background where you thought marijuana was bad and something people shouldn't use. What were some of the things that you learned through this journey that were the most profound as far as and challenging, if they did, those beliefs that you grew up with?
Dad, stop with the lights.
He can't stop it. It was the idea that there was a war on drugs and that there was propaganda and that there was a purpose and kind of an evil purpose for a lot of the information that got put out. And so I couldn't deal with it. And it just opened my eyes to, I just need to be super open-minded about what I hear and what I read and what people tell me.
Yeah.
And also, just when I was growing up, I could see like looking back what my parents saw and why they were telling me that. It made sense to them, but now I think they were wrong.
And so when your daughter approached you, she was coming from a place of trying to seek medical, I think, treatment. Did you bring in the war on drugs or information, or did she bring that, or did it become kind of iterative for both of you, bringing in new information and new pieces?
I think it was, I guess it was just trying to come to terms with what she was doing, and trying to find out everything I could about it, just learning about it.
And so if you were raising another crop of kids, do you think that you would wait for them to ask questions about marijuana, or do you think you would initiate some conversations?
I think it should be more normal, probably because it's legal in this state. It should probably be more like alcohol, where it's like open and it's something you talk about, and we talk about how to responsibly use alcohol. Well, here's how you responsibly use marijuana or cannabis. So just kind of something you have an ongoing conversation with, starting when they're young.
And have you had any conversations Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, please.
Just with your action, setting a good example.
Yeah. Have you had any conversations with other parents of teenage kids about your journey or about any of the information you've understood about marijuana, or is that something that you guys are just really doing within your own family?
That's so interesting. I feel like there's kind of a stigma about, like, if I went to another parent, like I talked about marijuana, like red wine or white wine, or, oh, my daughter was smoking marijuana, ha ha ha, at a party. Like, it seems still it has like a stigma about it.
I think you're right that it does still have a stigma. I think one of the things I do is sometimes I'll wear my normal women's shirt when I go to a playground with my tiny little kids, or when I go to school to pick them up, hoping to invite conversation. So I think you're right about the stigma, and I think that's that's the normalization part of normal women trying to make it a little more normal. So that's fascinating for the journey for your family. Any tips you might give to any parents who are watching this?
Yeah, definitely. So, number one is keep an open mind. Number two, just use your critical thinking skills when you receive information. And then just continue to educate yourself.
That's great. Okay. Well, thank you very much for those answers. Lisa, I know that you have given presentations to many cancer patients, to other healthcare folks, and also to seniors. So what's it like leading those conversations? And have things changed since you began having these types of cannabis conversations?
Wow, have they changed? So part of my nursing career involved education, lots and lots of education. And more and more, since medical was legalized in Washington, you get asked. And I love that, getting asked about that. It's fun for me. It used to kind of worry me, right? Because why did you ask me? Do I have a big pot leaf on my head? Is someone going to call? It made me really anxious. And they asked me because they trusted me. And that's everything, right? That means we had a Therapeutic Alliance. Please, please, please ask me. I love talking about it. I love empowering people, but really autonomy, right? The person has an ability to make a choice that impacts their quality of life. And this is all about quality of life. Happy to talk to all of them. Everyone's a little more educated than they were 10 years ago. I also work in a retail location, what you'd call a dispensary. I see physicians and healthcare professionals all the time on the down low coming to ask questions and look for resources. That's fun. I'm talking to seniors in senior centers and now via Zoom. So much fun. Seniors have so much experience and they want quality of life too. And frankly, they know their time is limited and they're not willing to put up with any baloney, right? I need to feel better. I want to feel better. I'm going to do this. I love that, right? And they're willing to go slow and experiment and share this with their healthcare team and their family for the most part. Pretty cool. And to talk to healthcare professionals who never got a cannabis education in their huge medical education, they're frustrated too. They don't have the same kind of knowledge that you might from all your study. So sharing, again, huge. I really like this part of my life where I get to talk to people about something that empowers them so much. I feel really lucky. Mm-hmm. And I'll go anywhere to talk about cannabis. because we all deserve that choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can remember when Normal Women first started doing some outreach. I think it was 2013 or 2014 to senior centers. And we had to come in with a sell and a pitch and try to be persuasive to even let us in the door. They thought, oh no, this will just stress out the people, the folks who live here. We would go to senior centers or facilities. And yeah, we can't even, we can't even fill all the requests we have at this point, because I feel like things have changed a lot. And I know that's in part because of having, trustworthy people out there sharing good information. So thank you for that and what you've done there. And do you have a relationship with some healthcare facilities, like with hospitals? Is that right?
Yes. So I worked in the academic system here in Seattle for the longest time. And so inpatient, outpatient, when I worked for them, I did their in-house education. Since I've left clinical care, I've been talking at continuing education events and been invited to spend an hour with like a team from my dispensary, and we really go deep into the ECS and why clients want to try this. And it is eye-opening for the healthcare team. It makes them look at this in a different way. And under the quality of life lens, why would you not want to try it? I mean, really. So it's interesting to see those options open up for clients.
Just in case anybody watching this wonders what the ECS is, Lisa's talking about the endocannabinoid system. It's not a system that's been known for that long, actually, in the scheme of things. But botanists like Michael Pollan will argue that our body is lined with these endocannabinoid receptors, and the plant, when you ingest it, puts out these cannabinoids that just fit perfectly, like a key and a lock. And the plant and humans share the same footprint all over Earth. They have grown and evolved to be in a symbiotic relationship. So that endocannabinoid system is just this entire system in your body. Your body makes some cannabinoids itself, and if it doesn't, then you really need to be a medical marijuana patient, probably. Because it regulates a lot of functions. So that's, I think, just in case anyone listening to this wonders what that is, and fascinating, and definitely worth a Google rabbit hole dive. Okay, thank you for that. Nancy, I wanted to ask you, where does someone who wants and maybe has some advice from their pet's healthcare professional to use cannabis, where can they go to get cannabis for their pets, and any strategies for trying to acquire that for your pet patients?
Thanks. And I just, before I answer that, I just wanted to also mention that the endocannabinoid system is not mutually exclusive just to humans, but other animals have an endocannabinoid system as well. And that's one of the reasons why you see so much anecdotal evidence of people claiming that, giving cannabis to their dog, to their cat, to their horses, why they've actually seen some improvements. So just wanted to put that out there, that it's not exclusively to humans. Whenever you're trying to find a good cannabis-based product, I mean, it's really hard these days on the CBD side, because of all of the different people making all sorts of claims, and not necessarily, and it's hard to tell if a product has what it actually should have. That's why I tend to recommend that people go to a dispensary, or if they are going to or if they do have to try to buy something, not locally, that they go for someone who actually has, certificate of authenticity, that there's third-party lab testing, so that you know that what they claim and that the amounts of CBD or THC is what it actually should be on the label. And also that they're testing for heavy metals. Now, when you're getting something from a dispensary, that's already sort of taken care of for you, depending on how your state tends to do things. Here in Washington, it'll say on the label what pesticides it may have been exposed to, and will also tell you the amount of THC or CBD. If you are going into a dispensary, you would be looking for a very high CBD product with a low THC rate. You can make extracts for your extracts for your pet, infused oils and tinctures using either flower or concentrates, and you can actually find some online dosing calculators that will help you calculate how many milligrams per drop or how many milligrams per teaspoon. But you would need to, of course, talk to your vet, and also, look into the dosing guidelines for pets. And you should always start low and go slow whenever you're doing any type of cannabis medicine. It's the same. That's the advice they give to humans, and it's even more so with your pets. You don't necessarily want to accidentally get your pet stoned, or in the case of dogs, you don't want to have an overdose. Even though there is a research article that does detail deaths from dogs that ingested infused products, but the cause of death was not from the THC itself. It was actually secondary infections from aspirating on vomit, and also from the other toxins. What they were eating were brownies that were made with very high medical grade cannabis, which had 10 times the amount of THC that a normal edible would possibly have, and also had things like chocolate, raisin, and macadamia nuts, all of which are toxic to dogs. So the THC itself, there has not been an actual lethal dose that has been found. But once again, you do want to always start low, go slow, and always make sure that you're monitoring how your dog or other animal is responding. And if you do start to see signs of distress, you may need to take them to the vet, even though there really isn't any antidote other than just time and making the animal comfortable and making sure that they don't aspirate on vomit, which is really that's the main side effect.
Would you, do you think that when people, if they are going to get a THC product, so they need to be in a dispensary rather than, an over-the-counter CBD, do you think people, and Lisa, feel free to chime in as someone who works at a dispensary, are you ever saying this is for my pet, or should you figure out what you want first and then go in and just shop for that product and not?
A lot of people come in and look for something for their pet.
Mm-hmm.
We're not really supposed to address that, but I give CBD to my dog, so I'll bring up what I do. And there's this bacon flavored tincture I give her that's primarily CBD with just a hair of THC. New flavor now, chicken. Who knew? But she really likes it, and a person can use it, or you can use it on the animal, put a little drop on their food. Again, like Nancy was saying, you have to go really low and slow because your dog doesn't have the words to tell you how they feel. So start small and just see how they're doing. I give my dog 4 drops max, and she's 80 pounds. So she's a micro doser every day. But she's a lot less anxious now. So good for her.
Liz, I wanted to ask you about having a cannabis conversation with your school.
When I had my first conversation about cannabis with my school, it was actually a teacher. It was my graphic designs teacher, and I told him I was like best friends with him in that class. Like, I loved him. And so I told him, I was like, hey, I want to have a dispensary when I'm older. He was like, oh my goodness, I know everyone for you. And so that got me on the discussion of like, oh my gosh, like maybe I can actually do this. So he was my first teacher that I had the conversation about like opening a dispensary. And then when I wanted to do it for my senior project, I had to tell my government teacher. And I told him, I was like, this is why I need to do it. Like, there are so many problems in this area. Like, I have so many things I can talk about it. Like, it's going to go on for hours. It's going to be a good presentation. And so they let me do it. And then my principal, oh my goodness, I was so scared to talk to her about cannabis, anything about cannabis. But we had a dessert and politics night, and that was just like a debate question night that we brought our parents in and sat in like 10 people groups probably. And my question was cannabis, like, why is it Schedule 1 related, like, or a Schedule 1 drug? Why can't we take it off that list? Because we don't have the research for that. And so I was really scared to talk to her about it, but then she reassured me that she believes that it's not a gateway drug, that she thinks that it might be able to help some people in their point of view. And so she always wanted to have, like, our school, I would say we were honestly pretty open about cannabis. Yes, like, we shouldn't have been maybe in the school setting, but my school was very, like, we wouldn't get in trouble, let's say, if we were, like, high in class. If we were doing our work and completely fine and, like, you can smell it, the teacher wouldn't get upset. They would just be like, okay, hey, like, you're doing your work, I see that, but don't do that maybe here next time. And it was completely fine. It was always, like, just an open-ended question, because a lot of my teachers were older, so they believed, like, oh my gosh, cannabis is a drug. And so when I got my government teacher, he was a very, very straightforward man, but he was actually open to talking to me about cannabis and learning about what I had to say. And so that really helps me, like, be on topic and show him, like, the ins and outs of why is it good? Why can't it be bad? But we wanted to show him, like, the open ends.
I like how you had an interest for your health, and now that's become an interest for a future business. And by the way, I think your the name Up and Away Supply sounds great. Do you also have your dispensary in mind?
Yes. So I have a trademark called So High Cannabis, but I couldn't use that as my business name right now for the paraphernalia company because the banks wouldn't take my money because it's cannabis related. But I've started the paraphernalia company. I'm just waiting to hear back from dispensaries. Lisa, I know that you work at a dispensary, so I would love to email you my sheet if you would be open to that. And yeah, I don't like the industry. I don't like how it's predominantly a white male industry. And I would love to be a women-owned dispensary. My best friend and I have started this. Sammy, she's my business partner as well as my lobby day partner. And so, yeah, we've just started this and we're really excited.
And so just to follow that, you started with your interest in health. You really got educated. You got your mom super educated.
Oh, yeah.
You moved into this business side. But I personally just feel so, I just feel a lot of admiration for you to bringing it to that next level of civics and democracy.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you kind of talked about talking to your government teacher, but really you had, in order to graduate, you had to have like a pro bono civics project. And what you chose to do was to help normal women and women, several who have never been to the Capitol, come meet with their legislators, talk about why cannabis is important to them and why we need to bring social justice and facts to this. And you and your partner, Sammy, made it our most professional lobby day. And you guys got to meet with your representatives as well. And it was just the two of you in a meeting with your representatives. How did that go? How did that feel?
We were so nervous at first, but we were really just wanting to understand their point of view as well as to get ours across, because not everyone's going to share the same thoughts as us. So we were just getting ready to hear like, oh, maybe our answer or question wasn't the right one for this person. But then we just kind of got the hang of it, and everyone was extremely nice and extremely like open to like the questions and answers and whatever facts that we brought. They were like, okay, yeah, like actually listening to us. And that made us feel important in a way, like, oh, our legislative is listening and not just on their phones or doing whatever they do on their computers. So it was really nice.
Yeah, that was great. It was wonderful to have you, and you put a ton of work into it, and we really appreciate it. All right, we're coming closer to the end of this panel, so I want to put these two questions out, and you guys please answer whichever you want. I'd just like you to talk a little bit about your favorite cannabis conversation you've ever had, or maybe your least favorite or the hardest cannabis conversation you've had. So please take one of those and share with us. All right, Liz, you're on the big screen, so you're going first.
Okay. My favorite cannabis conversation was probably my scariest. It was with my real pediatrician doctor, because I went to a marijuana professional for it, my medical card, and I thought she was going to chop my head off. So I was really nervous to talk with her because I thought she was going to try to persuade me to do all these anxiety pills, all these sleeping pills, eating pills. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is going to turn out bad. But she actually was very, very open and very kind about what I was saying. And what she mainly was going across was I am adopted and I come from a drug addict family. And so she was like, addiction could be a possibility, but the way that you're telling me how you're using it, and like I showed her my medical card, I showed her my like the whole paper signed and everything explaining why I would need it. And I used to throw up from panic attacks, but since I started using marijuana, I haven't thrown up. And that was like the main reason I got my medical card, to just try to stop throwing up. And she saw that. I put on a little bit of weight, and she saw that. So she was actually happier than upset. So I was happy about that.
Oh, that's great. Sound very brave. Good job.
Thank you.
Okay. Molly.
My favorite conversations around cannabis are how to help victims of the war on drugs and the social justice aspect. I just totally get into it and I love it. And I want to do all I can to help those people.
Oh, that's great. Who have you, Molly, just following up on that, who have you had a conversation with that, or have you initiated any conversations about social justice with anyone that you were surprised that it went well or it didn't go well?
That's a really good question. I think I've mostly kept to my family. I haven't really gotten outside and started like speaking to other people. Like I'm donating money to different organizations, but I'm not evangelizing myself.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's an area of opportunity.
I love your framing of everything in this whole day and all the stuff you said. And once again, that's a great way to look at it. It's an area of opportunity. Okay, that's great. All right, Nancy, how about you? Favorite, least favorite?
I would have to say my favorite would be the one that I alluded to earlier, which was when I had a conversation with my vet, and when my vet said that she was not only totally down with it, but she recommended that I keep doing what I'm doing and keep making formulas for my dog. And because that was a very scary thing, because I was doing something that I was making myself, and you know, there's not really a whole lot of information that's out there, and there's always the concern that your pet care professional might look at it as, you know, something harmful rather than helpful. And so when she said, "Are you giving THC?" and I said yes, and she's like, "Good," I was just elated that she got it, and that she was a vet that I could be totally open and honest with.
I like how, as you guys are going over this, you know, we've heard stories about being really worried or anxious about a conversation with a government teacher or a representative or a vet or the principal or a pediatrician, and they all, at least in these examples, turned out better than everyone hoped. So I think that's really encouraging for people to be brave to have those conversations in the future. All right, Lisa, bring us home.
Okay, well, I'm going to go with an important conversation. So a lot of times at when I was working clinical nursing or working in the dispensary, women come up and talk to me about sexual assault. And cannabis is a really important part of a woman's sexuality, right? You can use cannabis to help treat your post-traumatic stress and reclaim this. Sexuality is a very important part of our lives, and it can be really difficult to talk about, and it can be really difficult to talk about an assault. And lots of women have been assaulted. So I really like talking about THC and CBD. I generally talk about inhalation as a rapid way to be on board. It's nice to have people come back and say, "Hey, yeah, that really worked for me." And we're not talking about being obliterated at all, being present, but it's a really important conversation. And I feel lucky that people felt safe enough to talk to me about it, because I'm going to talk to you about it now and other people, because it's important.
Oh, that's great. Well, I think that cannabis conversations are varied and very important. And I think another kind of conversation we might think about having right now is with those people who are trying to get a job with us. And I'm talking about the people who are running for office, the people who are not just running for president or senate, but people who are running for the Port Authority or the school board. And remember that these people are trying to get a job for you. So it is absolutely your right, if not your duty, to ask them questions that are important to you. And those might well involve questions about how they feel about cannabis and how they would regulate it. So a path to normalization is always having that opportunity and taking that opportunity to talk to your politicians, talk to the people who are running, not just when they're running, but once they're in office. And I think another thing that Molly said that I thought I would add is, you know, right now, especially here in Washington or the Pacific Northwest, it is not hard to get cannabis. But it's not like this everywhere in the country, let alone the world. I think the only people who are having a hard time getting cannabis here are the people who want to do research, the medical and scientific researchers, because they are bogged down by the federal system that makes them only get that really old and moldy, gross weed from the University of Mississippi. So I think we all might want to keep that pressure on to lift all those restrictions. Let's free this plant and let's free the science. Because that will be really helpful in terms of having those conversations, because we can be able to draw on even more information. And the more information that comes out, the more we learn that this was the wrong plant to prohibit. So I am really glad that all of you guys came and had this conversation.
And the land is dark.